you, Martha. So as Veronica said, Martha and Janice will be taking care of the questions that are posted. Please, Martha and Janice, let me know if there's anything that has been addressed that needs to be addressed by live. Definitely, I can go ahead and address that. So as you all know, this is TE Basics, and we're basically going to cover the basics of the software TE TOPSpro Enterprise. So just to give you a quick overview here, when you are to start with CASAS, you are given two applications. One will be TOPSpro Enterprise, that is TE, that's short for TE, and the other one is eTest Online, that is your testing application. So the testing application will be eTest Online, and the administrative application will be TOPSpro Enterprise. What is exactly an administrative task? Well, creating users' accounts, say for example, submitting reports or creating reports, adding students and so forth. That will be an administrative task that will be best for TE. Then testing will be for eTest. Now, for those of you who do not have TE installed on your computer, you would go ahead and start by going to our eTest website. Our eTest website would let you access eTest as well as install TE Enterprise. So TOPSpro Enterprise. So let me go ahead and switch to my screen. Let me go ahead and share my screen. All right, very good. Can everybody see my screen? Give me a thumbs up, please. Very good. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So I'm currently at the CASAS website over here, but let's go ahead and switch to TE or eTest. I'm sorry. Let's see. Give me 1 second. Let me just go ahead and click on my page over here. All right. So one thing to point out is that we have multiple servers for the connection of TE and eTest. And depending on where you are located as far as a state is what server you're going to be using. For example, California has its own server, Washington has its own server, and if you have not been specified a specific server, then you are to go to the global. The global is where everybody else goes to. So it's very important because without that specific address, each server has its own address. Without that specific address, you won't be able to log in. In addition to that, you would have to have a user account under TE. That's where TE comes into play. That user account is created by your data manager. The account for the data manager is created by CASAS at the point of setting up your agency. All right, so here we are at the global server, and it doesn't say global, but it says etestonline.org. As opposed to California, it will say ca.etestonline.org, just to give you an example. So the page looks exactly the same. You can see on the upper left-hand corner the Install TE Client button. When you click on this button, then the system is going to go ahead and install TE on your computer. The requirements for TE are to be Windows 10 with your most updated update. All right, so there is no installation on a Mac, there is no installation on a Chromebook. It has to be on TE. On the other hand, eTest, it's a web-based application. So in order to sign in from eTest, you can go ahead and do it basically from any platform, but for the purpose of testing alone, you would want to go ahead and test under the 3 platforms that we have compatibility with. That will be, once again, Windows 10, and then Chromebooks with your most updated updates, and iPads. So those are the 3 platforms that we are compatible for eTest for testing. For TE, it's just Windows 10 with your most updated update. All right, so once you install TE, the system is going to take you to this screen over here. For the purpose of this exercise, we're going to be using the Rolling Hills website. The Rolling Hills website is a simulation database that CASAS has for the purpose of testing things out. So say, for example, you want to see what's the behavior of the software when you create a new record, a new student demographic record. So instead of using your database to do that, where you can might delete something that is important, you can go ahead and use the simulation database, and there is no worry about deleting. You can import, you can export, you can delete, you can import multiple tasks. This data gets reset overnight, so whatever you enter, it will be public to the rest of the everyone who connects during that day, but overnight it resets. So just be careful of what you input in the database, but the data will be reset overnight. So really, there is no harm. You can go ahead and do anything you want with that database. Before we get started, let me refer you to a quick document that we're going to be following up. So I'm going to switch to the CASAS website, and as you can see, that is www.casas.org. Once you are at the home page, you would go ahead and click on Training and Support on the top menu, and then on the side menu, we're going to click on eTest Online Help. We're going to scroll down to the section of TOPSpro Enterprise Basics. TOPSpro Enterprise Basics. So under TOPSpro Enterprise Basics, we're going to focus on this document over here. These documents are large, by the way. So each one will give you, a detailed, definition basically of the TOPSpro Enterprise Quick Start. So the Quick Start is more of a summarized, document, whereas everything else, it specifies in details about that specific session. Say, for example, those of you who are looking to know about scanning, there's the TOPSpro Enterprise Basic Scanning. Those of you who are looking to generate reports, which, by the way, Marta will be doing a, focused report training. I believe that is this Thursday, Marta, if you can confirm.
Yes, it's going to be this Thursday, tomorrow at 1 o'clock.
Okay, very good. So those of you who want to focus on generating reports would go ahead and please enroll to Martha's training tomorrow. We're definitely going to review reports, but this is going to be more of a general approach. Martha's going to be going into details for reporting. All right. So in order to follow these training for today, we're going to go ahead and download, TOPSpro Enterprise Quick Start. All right, that will give us our summarized of what we're going to be covering today. But please feel free to refer to this page. Very, very useful. It carries all the information that you will come across, such as, monitoring your WTUs. Those of you who are doing e-tests, for example, here's a good handy document that will walk you through the report or lister that is available to see the your WTUs available. WTU, for those of you who don't know, stands for Web Test Units, and those are the test units that are consumed at the point of testing with e-test. All right? Are we good so far? Any questions so far? I'll take that as a thumbs up. All right, very good. So we're going to go ahead and follow the document here. Very good. So this will be your TOPSpro Enterprise Basics. So I have a printout already. So those of you who are following the document, let's go ahead and switch to page 3. Page 3. All right. All right. So on page 3, as I said, you basically have multiple browsers to connect. We're going to be using, for the point of this exercise, this practice here, we're going to be using the Rolling Hills Simulation Database. As you can see on my screen, these are the settings for the Rolling Hills. Server, we click on the pull-down menu, we choose Rolling Hills. State agency site will be 4908. That's the number, that agency number that has been assigned to the simulation server for Rolling Hills. Administrator1 at rhas.org will be my username, but we have a total, I believe, of 50 accounts. So it's basically administrator1 to administrator 50. You can have multiple users connect under the same number, but just to free up the traffic in our server, we provide 50 accounts for you to choose anywhere from 1 through 50. All right, the server is not going to reject your login in if you are entering a login that it's already being used. No, the system will go ahead and allow you to come in. All right, so I'm going to be administrator1 at rhas.org. So rhas.org, that is for Rolling Hills Adult School. And the password will be admin. So ADMIN, admin. Lowercase, by the way, it's all lowercase. So I'm going to go ahead and connect. All right, so as you can see, this is TE. You have a white screen. You might have on your end a startup page. This is a default page that has been enabled by the programmers, and we'll go over that in a bit. And that is basically telling you any updates, any news, any new development features that have come with the software, any important dates that have that need to be kept in mind. So it's basically just a quick page to update you with information that is important with the software. All right, so we're going to go ahead and do a quick overview starting from the left to the right. So starting with the TE icon. So we're going to go ahead and hover, just hover, not click, just hover on top of the TE icon. Notice that when I hover, it tells me that I am connected to the Rolling Hills website. It tells me my agency ID, and it tells me the user. Many times when people call at tech support, the very first thing we ask is, what is your agency ID? And if you are not familiar with your agency ID, yet you're connected to TOPSpro Enterprise, this is a good way to come up with this information. Only hover on top of the TE icon, and it will go ahead and tell you the server you're connected to, your agency, and the username. Now, if we click on this icon, we get the following options. So we have lock, obviously that is to lock the application. We have disconnect, that is if you would like to go back to the login screen. Say for the purpose you're walking away from your desk, disconnect will be the best option. You can go ahead and log in back again as you come back to your desk. Change password, that is to change your password in case you would like to switch a different password. Associate account, we're going to go ahead and leave that because that will be more of an advanced feature. And for options, we're going to click on options here. So these are your general options that the system will provide. So here, do you have, if you would like to set, for example, the time that your system logs out itself as it's being inactive, you can always go ahead and set that time over here. As you can see, by default, it's set to 30 minutes. But if you would like to extend this longer, you can go ahead and set it, or perhaps, make it shorter. You can always change it. Again, it's in minutes. On start, that's basically the web page that we were talking about. Let's go ahead and click over here on start, and that will give us the news and updates, that are coming up for TE and ETS too. They're both, one same database. Then it also tells you to give you a warning for the remaining WTUs. Once again, WTU stands for Web Test Unit, and this is for those ETS users. And basically, the system, as you log in, is going to go ahead and give you a update of your WTUs if you happen to be lower than the amount specified over here. So if you are a big agency, 500 will be fine to have as a reminder. If you're a smaller agency, on the other hand, perhaps you want to lower that. I believe that the lowest you can put is 100. But either way, the purpose of this is so that you can go ahead and order new WTUs before this expires. How do you order WTUs? You go through the CASA's website, and there's an order button where you can go ahead and select your WTUs. The Department for Orders require 3 to 5 days of processing. Those are working days, business days, so you have to do it within time in advance. So you might ask, what happens if I hit 0? The system will not stop you from testing. You will get a friendly call from CASA saying, hey, you are on the negative, but there is no, there is no stopping of the test. For if you just reach, 0. But either way, by all means, you have to, purchase those WTUs before you reach to 0. All right, so we're going to click on the edit view. So the edit view basically tells you how names are displayed, whether they are to be on proper settings. So basically proper is the first letter of the name will become a capital. All uppercases will be, as it says, for all letters to be uppercase or unchanged. Whether it is lowercase or uppercase, first letter, last letter, it's unchanged. All right, so as you can see, the default setting, it's proper. All right, we're going to switch to listers, and under listers here you have the default settings for your listers. These are all defaults, and there is no need to change on any of this. Notice that the listers will auto refresh. So if you are to change AID, the system will go ahead and auto refresh. There is no need for refreshing and so forth. So you have different settings that are default. We're going to click on reports, and under reports, again, these are all the settings for defaults, and we're just going to leave everything as default for now. Okay. So these are your settings for your imports. Notice that for those of you who are using, accumulated hours, there is an option over here through importing through a third-party system to, collect those hours as accumulated. Those are different types of hours that the system receives for attendance. And for export, here you have, as you know, you have the capability of exporting data to different third-party systems. So these are your options to export. In addition to these sections, these tabs, we have this little arrow pointing to the right, and we have additional options for your panels. We're just going to go ahead and leave that as it is in your dashboard. All right, so just to give you a quick review. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And next, we're going to go ahead and continue with the view button. All right, so looking at our document here, print up document, we are now on page 5. On page 5. All right, so under view, you have the start page. Remember how we were saying that by default, your start page would open. Now that we enable that setting under our options in the TE button over here, so we're going to go ahead and get this screen over here. So this is your starting page. Notice that you have a lot of how-to documents. You have shortcuts, just tips for shortcuts. Recent generated reports, so it gives you a preview of what reports you are using the most, and by any announcements made by the state, any announcements made by CASAS, by your agency site, and so forth. Alerts, and other information. You can always click this red button to close the screen. And now we're going to continue with the next option under view. So again, we're going to go ahead and leave dashboard to the side. That will be more of an advanced feature. For view, notice that you have small, normal, medium, and large. So what this does is basically changes the size of your menus. So notice what happens when I click large. menu becomes larger. One thing to disclose is that the larger the menu, the names of the titles of the menu are, the less real estate you have on your screen. So there will be less space for other options. So you will see as we travel from one section to the other in TE that at times when there's too many buttons, the system will use a more button. That is M-O-R-E, more button, and that will be displayed on the far right upper corner. That button basically will contain any other button that doesn't fit in my screen. So if I click on the more button, I can go ahead and find any other buttons I'm looking for that specific screen. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and change the view back to normal. All right, and now we're going to switch to organization. So the organization menu basically refers to the agency in general. What exactly is this information? Well, anything that has to do with your agency, that will be your agency information, and that will be the very first section as you see, the sites that this agency has, the classes that this agency is giving, the user, those are the TE users, that user accounts that the software has for this agency, their access group, that's basically the level of access where they can go, what they can do, personnel, that will be teachers, test administrations, that will be your WTUs, so all this information pertains to the agency. Also notice that down the list, we have testing sessions. This is very important for those agencies who are doing e-tests, especially during this time when we're transitioning from one year to the other, where you're going to find yourself having to copy your sessions from the previous program year. So if you have not copied your sessions from the previous year or have not logged in under e-test yet, you're going to notice that when you log in under e-test, your screen for e-test under testing sessions is empty. Again, this is because the system will go ahead and require you to replicate your sessions from the 1920 program year onto the 2021. This is a process that, even though it has to do with e-test, is done under TE. So that is under your organization menu in testing sessions. All right, so just to give you a little bit of information. So for the practice today, we're gonna go ahead and click on agency. Every agency has one agency record. In this case, this is Rolling Hills Adult School. I'm gonna double click on this agency. And notice the format that TE uses, where you have a navigator on the upper left with all the options pertaining to the main page. The main page being, in this case, the agency information page. So here, under my navigator, I have edit view. Most of your pages are going to have edit view. That's just, your current, general page. Then also, because we're dealing with agency, you have sites. So I click on sites. Notice that my main page changes to the number of sites I have. Just to give you a quick, quiz over here, how many sites do I have under the Rolling Hills database without counting them by hand? All right, I will say that is 8. Thank you. Yes, there you go, 8. And where do you see that? Obviously, you can count them visually, but this count over here is the one that you want to refer to. So it says 1 out of 8, meaning the position of my cursor right now is at, the first record out of 8. So a total of 8. Obviously, it's easy to count visually, but this becomes more handy when you have hundreds and hundreds of records and you want to see how many, records you have for such criteria. Students under, 20, enrolled in ESL. So if you do a filter, which we're gonna get there soon, but this comes in handy to see the count. All right, very good. So we're going to go ahead and continue down. Test administrations, remember how we talked about your WTUs. So this is, a lister format of your WTUs. A little harder to read. I will say it's best and recommended to switch to a report format, which is under report, CASA's E-test and WTU balance. This will give you a easier way to read this. But essentially, once you understand what what the system is doing, you can go ahead and understand the format for this lister as well. All right, so continuing down, program years. What program years refers to is the years in which you have been entering data for your agency. So for Rolling Hills, we have a total of 12. Once again, I'm referring to this scan over here. We have a total of 12 years of activity. And if I am to expand the column, notice how I expand the column by clicking in between those two columns. I get that double-sided arrow. I can go ahead and expand this, as well as I can expand my funding sources. Those of you who are WIOA, you have your funding sources. Excuse me. And, there are your funding sources if you ever need to enable, and you have your years of activity. All right. So users, on the other hand, we're going to go ahead and click on users. These are the users that you have created under your own agency. Of course, we're talking about, in this case, of our simulation database, and these are the users that are available in the system. So I stand corrected over here. I said that there's about 50, but it seems that there's higher now. So we have 59, 60. Yes, we have a total of 60 apparently, users. You might notice that we also have coordinators, we have proctors, and so forth. Those are basically for the simulation, part of eTest. So you can not only do a simulation, log into the simulation website or simulation database for TE to manage your Rolling Hills data, but you can also use the simulation part of eTest, and that will be, to go into the eTest online / Rolling Hills. All that information, we can give you that information, if you are to contact us, at tech support, and you would also see, let's see, I don't even see that information. Oh yes, that information is on page 3, just for your reference. The training page, the training website is on page 3. That is etestonline.org / Rolling Hills / HTML5, just as a reference, okay? So these are your users. Users will require a level of access group that basically determines what access they are to have. All right, so and as you can tell, there's other information such as class definition over here, personnel, which will be teachers. Those of you who need to create your teachers, this is one way to access the teachers and so forth. So we're going to go ahead and close this. We're going to move along. And just to show you, in addition to agencies, you have classes, you have users, and this data might repeat from what you saw on the navigator. There's different ways that data could be accessed in TE. But just to quickly show you the display of your classes. So under organization classes, you have definitions and instances. So the way TE structures the class format is by first creating a definition and then an instance. What is a definition? As the name suggests, the definition basically carries the ID of the class and carries the name of your class. So the name or description of your class, I should say. So if I am to create a class, the very first thing I want to do is set a definition. When you create a definition, there is no such thing of a date or anything of that, because the definition, notice I'm going to click on the new button here, the definition does not carry any time frame. The definition is just purely your ID and your description. Of course, there's other information that is pretending, but the minimum amount of information you need to save a record will be a class ID and a class description. The record would have to be saved under the site level. Once you create that definition, let's go ahead and quickly create one. So I'm going to say ID. Notice that TE will take numerical and alphabetical characters. So I'm just going to say CASAS 2020. That will be my ID, and my description will be ESL beginning. Okay, so once I click save over here, notice that I'm under the agency level. Notice what happens over here. the system will tell me that the class has to be assigned under the agency level. So I'm going to go ahead and set it under North Campus. All right, then I'm going to click Save. Once I click Save, notice what happened on my navigator. So remember, the navigator refers to the different sections that pertain to the main page over here. In this case, this main page being my class definition. So now that I created a class definition, I have the opportunity to create a class instance, class enrollments, class records, and add teachers. So in class instances, this is where you enter the parameters of that class that pertain to the current program year. So if I am to click on the new button here, notice that I have my site and I have the program year. So in this case will be my current program year, and you have TE setting automatically a start and an end date for my class. Obviously, your class does not start on 7/1/2020, and obviously your class does not end on 6/30/2021. This is just TE letting you know that these two fields are required in order to save the record. You can always change this record by clicking, deleting this, and entering a new date, or choosing a date from your calendar. So you click over here and it will give you the date. In addition to that, you would go ahead and set your instructional programs here. Any special programs, could be set over here. Those of you who, by the way, are doing, distance learning will go ahead and use this menu as well. So distance learning is over here. So that will be a completely separate subject, but this is where you set up your distance learning classes. So you enter any of the information that pertains to your class. Again, if this will be a distance learning, you are to determine if this will be classroom plus distance learning or distance learning only. So we'll just set this as distance learning only. Physical settings, let's just go ahead and do home over here. And here you are to enter the days of that the class is being held. And on the bottom, you are to determine whether this class will collect attendance for distance learning. Notice that by default, it's set as not specified. So we can click on the pull-down menu and say yes. This class will collect distance learning hours, and then you are to determine the duration of the class in minutes. So that is the daily duration of that class. And here you go ahead and determine the total time in hours. Notice this is in hours now of the class in the term. So this will be for the day. This will be for the term. And obviously here you specify the distance learning minutes for that specific day. All right. Any questions so far? Janice and Martha, have I missed anything? Is there anything that needs to be addressed live?
There's a couple of questions, Oscar, on the chat box. Hoffman is asking, is the class ID the name of the class? I entered a response in there that's saying that the class ID is the number that you can assign to a class, like, for example, class 101, and a class description would be the name of the class, for example, ESL beginning. That would be an example. There is another question asked, Ms. Hoffman or Mr. Hoffman is saying, what if you go from classroom to distance learning due to conditions that are out of your control?
Very good question. Very good question. So if that is the case, and perhaps Janice will be the best person to answer this question. Janice, are you there?
She had to exit.
She has to exit. Okay, very good. So if that is the case, basically a distance learning class, it's one that would, do more than 50% of its time, of its attendance time through distance learning. If you happen to have a class that will not, you basically are to, foreseen this. It's difficult because we don't know when we're going back in many of the cases here. So, but if you do know, you basically set your class regularly without distance learning. And then notice that when you do distance learning, though, here, the system will let you select the in-classroom hours versus the distance learning. This is why you are to determine here the amount of time in minutes for the class, and out of that, you are to determine over here in this field, distance learning duration in minutes, the amount of time per class that is consumed only for distance learning. So the system does a calculation right there and determines that, if you're saying that the class lasts 2 hours and you're only claiming 1 hour under distance learning, therefore the other hours will be, either instructional, in classroom, or perhaps this will be a homework, time for the student or so forth, but definitely that is a good question. The system will give you the capability of entering in classroom, hours and, divide them or specify those distance learning hours from the in-classroom instructional time. All right, very good questions. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and continue. I'm gonna go ahead and close this tab. Notice what the system does as I am traveling from one section to the other. So the system provides me with this breadcrumb of tabs, so I can basically go back to where I was before by clicking on the previous tab, by clicking on the previous tab. If I don't need them anymore, I can just go ahead and click on that more button. Remember that more button we said earlier? Here it is. I'm gonna click on the more button and I can go ahead and close my pages. I'm sorry, pages over here. It's over here. But either way, this is your more button over here. Basically, what this is telling me is that there is not enough space over here to fit all these buttons. So it's going to give me a more button and give me the additional options to export, to print, to disconnect, and so forth. All right. So we're going to go ahead and click on Pages and close all pages. When I close all pages, if there is any record that is pending, the system will go ahead and ask me if this is needed to be saved. So we're going to say no in this case. All right. So next, we're going to continue with records. So you might ask, what is the difference between organization and records? So remember, organization pretends to the information for your agency. Records, on the other hand, pretends to the information for the student. What does that mean? Well, what is, for example, the demographics of your student? What are the demographics of the student? What classes the student is enrolled to? What programs the student is enrolled to? The test the student has taken, and so forth. So these all pertains to the student. So we're going to go ahead and go to record students demographics. Record students demographics. So what you're going to see here is what we call a lister. Basically, is a spreadsheet, with rows and columns of those students that are active in the program year. I emphasize in the word active because, say for example, if you are to create a demographic record, just like the way of creating a class definition, there is no date set for that demographic record because the purpose of this is for that demographic record to be available across years. But once you enter activity for the current program year, and by activity I mean class enrollment, program enrollment, hours of attendance, tests, any of those records will contain a date that follows under the current program year. Then the system will go ahead and create activity for the current student. So these records that you see listed over here, they all have activity in the current program year. If you are creating a new student and click on the new button, notice the new button will always be on the upper left, and you just create a demographic record. Do not enter, if you happen not to enter any activity, don't expect to see that demographic record appearing on this list. But once you enter that activity, then you can go ahead and see that student being populated under this lister. So you might ask yourself, well, Oscar, if I create the demographic record, but how am I going to add activity if I cannot even access the record through this lister? That's a fair question. So what you need to do in the event that you are creating a demographic record and need to follow up at a later point, or right after even, with activity, you can go ahead and click on this filter button. The filter button sets the default for each lister. So here, the default setting is by current program year. So obviously, if the current program year will be your 2021 year, meaning if the student has any activity, class enrollment, program enrollment, hours, tests, in the current program year, it would automatically appear in this list. If the student does not, it will not appear. So if you are to remove this option over here, notice my count over here, by the way, is 6,790. If I am to click OK now, the system is going to be looking across years regardless of their status of activity, whether they have only a demographic or they have all kinds of activity across year. The system's going to go ahead and give me that total number. So what is the number? We're going to click on that handy dandy more button. Notice now the number is different. We have 15,194 records. Obviously, this is every record possible under the 12 years or so that we have in the database. All right, so if you need to look for any record that does not have activity, the trick is click on the filter button, remove the option of current program year, which is already removed, then click OK, and now you can go ahead and search for that record. Now, since we are at the lister page over here, let me go ahead and address some of these buttons. All right, so and just to check on our documentation page, we are basically on page 6 addressing records. All right, so page 6 and some of the page 8, I'm sorry, so page 8. All right, so as you know, the new button creates a new demographic record. If we click on that new button, notice that the system will go ahead and give me a blank page with the demographic information. There is a new feature, by the way, on TE generating a new ID for agencies. This is a brand new feature that was just released, a couple of weeks ago, or maybe perhaps just, as far as a month, I will say. So TE now generates IDs for you, and it's a very useful, feature. And, so you don't have to create one, you don't have to assign one. Of course, if you have your registration database that does one, then it's up to you whether you want to follow that format or a format for TE. If you would like to have more information about the generation of student IDs, do know that that is under organization, agencies. I'm going to go ahead and take you back over here. I'm going to click on the agency record, click on the pencil icon over here. And we want to enable this right here, ID auto generation method. Notice that by default, it's set as none. You want to go ahead and change this and switch it to any format that caters best for your agency. Whether this is a random number, whether this is a fixed 10-digit, number, or this is a combination of the name plus the birthday plus a random number. It all depends. The system will go ahead and, do that. And if you do so, do know that your agencies that are already existing in your database will not change. They're still the same, so it's just for any new record that you are to create. All right, so that's a little tip for a new feature that's coming, that has been released. I'm sorry, for the generation of IDs. Let me go back to the lister. And you are to enter this information, the minimum amount of information in order to create a student ID will be ID, obviously, and I believe it's just ID now, because the system will go ahead and, let's just go ahead and test this out. So I'm going to go ahead and do Oscar 1, 2, 3, and I'm just going to go ahead and save that. Now, one thing to point out is that we are saving under the agency level. The system will tell us, just like with the class. Remember how we created the class definition and asked us to save it under the site? It's going to ask us to do the same. There you go. So please select a site, not an agency. So we're going to go ahead and save it under North Campus once again. And also notice that the system will highlight the areas that are, necessary. So this is a good, guidance of what is necessary in order to save this record. I'm going to go ahead and populate these fields, first name, last name, and we have a gender. Notice that under gender, that's a new field as well. We have non-binary as well. All right. So notice the birthday was not a necessary field. So there is, obviously you want to have as much information as possible, but if this information comes through another means, let's say through testing for e-test or in import perhaps, you have the option to do it one way or another. So I'm going to go ahead and click save. Require ID is missing. Of course, it changed the I did. So we're gonna do Oscar 1, 2, 3. So save. There you go. So now the record, let me save. So again, let me ask you this question. Should I expect this demographic record to appear under my demographic lister? Quick answer, the answer is no, because there is no mention of dates. You know what? Nothing to do with the birth date. That's not a date of activity. There was no mention of dates in this form, as you can see. So if I need to access Oscar the record over here, I would have to make sure that I clear the filters as I did, so I can go ahead and access this record. How do I look for a record? Well, there's different ways to do so. If I am to click, notice that each column has this little icon that looks like a funnel, right? So this funnel is basically called Add Filters. So if I am to click under my Add Filter for student ID, I can go ahead and enter the ID Oscar 1, 2, 3. And I usually like to select Contains, because as opposed to the default start with, if my ID does not start with exactly what I'm setting, the system is not going to give me any matches. Whereas if I click Contains, even if my the way I enter the name is close, then the system will go ahead and give me that result. There it is. There's Oscar 1, 2, 3. All right. So again, this only works when I remove the filter, option. All right. So in addition to that, you have aggregated. Aggregated means basically when the student has activity under multiple sites, it aggregates the information under one record, but obviously there is data from multiple sites. There are sub-sites, and that it means when you have a breakdown of a site and then another breakdown of another level of a breakdown under a site, that will be a sub-site. So it tells me what are the sub-sites. Filter, as we already said, that's basically setting up, some filters. In addition to my Add Filter button over here, I have tons of default, filters here that I can go ahead and use them. All right. So then you have columns. Columns basically tells you the default columns that are addressed for that specific lister. But in addition to that, I can also bring address. I can also bring age. I can also bring, email. Any of this information is also, viewable by just clicking on that. In addition to that, I can always right-click on my title bar. This is what we call the title bar. The bar on the top where you have the titles for the columns, and it gives me that same list where I can choose additional columns. This list changes depending on the page that I'm on. If I am at program enrollments, the options are going to be more pertaining to the enrollment of the student in a program. All right, so but those are additional columns. In addition to, since we are in this subject, you can also remove the columns. So I can right-click on a specific column and choose Hide Native Language. When I do that, that disappears. If I right-click again and say Show age, it will go ahead and give me that column for age. And notice that any column that I bring also contains its own filter. For filter for age, you have start and end with. For ethnicity, on the other hand, you actually have the available ethnicities there for you to filter. It all pertains to the column that you are selecting. All right, so to keep going now, we're going to go ahead and continue here. Sort, as the name says, is just to sort from A through C. Delete, be very careful, that is to delete a record. If a record has activity, you have to delete the activity first before you can delete the record. And a lot of the times you are required to have a second person to confirm that deletion. That is just a mechanism that the programmers have set as a security for people not to go crazy deleting. Because trust me, we have seen that situation in tech support. And just a reminder, you're dealing with a live database. So there's no undo process here. This is not Word, Microsoft Word, where you can click undo until the beginning of your document. No, there is no such thing of undoing. This is all live. All right. So then you have batch delete, takes the concerns of deleting to a higher level. Batch edit, if you are looking to edit multiple records with the same information, but edit will be the button. Notice that these two buttons are not selected, are not highlighted or grayed out, I should say, because it requires multiple records, the selection of multiple records to appear. Here's my count again, and any other buttons that don't, that don't have space under my screen will come under the more. So here you have the print button. Here you have the export. Those of you who are looking to export. Another new feature that has been released is your RLI invite. So those are basically locators or placement forms that you can go ahead and send through the demographic record. It's an invitation that is sent either through email or text or perhaps both, and the student gets that and can go ahead and take that placement test in the comfortable environment of home without a proctor. There is no need of a proctor, and they get it through their phone, they get it through their email, they take that, locator, or that appraisal, and it's once they finish, it's translated to, or it's reported back to your database in TE. So it's very, very handy. It's not a test. It's a form of, a placement test, and it's basically used so that once the student shows up, it puts you in the head start of what test to give the student, once they show up to the agency, or if you would like to, do proctored remote testing, you can go ahead and follow up with that. So that will be, a very handy feature. Any questions so far, Martha? Or anything that you would like to add, Martha?
No, I think we're fine. I've answered a few questions on the chat box. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you. All right, so moving along, we're going to go ahead and close that student tab. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that X to close that, and we're going to move to report. Again, for those of you who are looking to get more into report, we're just doing an overview over here, but those of you who are looking to get, deeper into report, I suggest you to please register to Martha's session tomorrow. All right, so under reports, we have multiple reports, whether these are reports related with e-test, whether these are reports related with your demographics, whether these are reports related with your test results, which is one of the most common areas. So let's go ahead and quickly run one example for some of the areas. So I'm going to go ahead and start with CASA's e-test and WTU balance. Let's see, let's hope that, again, we're working with simulated data over here, so I'm hoping that there is data over here for this report. Notice that all I did was click on the generate button on the top, and it generates my report. Okay, very good. So here we are. So this report, this is your WTU balance web test units. Again, these are the units that are consumed in e-test when the student is to test. So you can see on the report that it tells you when the purchase happened of your WTUs. Anywhere from the beginning, this was back in 8/12/2015, to the very latest purchase that was done on 7/16/2018. The system does the calculation and basically does the plus and and minuses of consumption here, and it gives you the total. So the grand total we have for the rolling hills of WTU is 4,007 WTUs. That's basically the addition of all these remaining balances. All right. So this is a lot easier than referring to the previous section, which was organization and test administration. So this is easier to read. All right, but essentially the numbers are the same. All right, so that is your, WTU report. Notice that on the bottom you have a criteria and basically tells you the selections that you have made in order to run this report. Obviously, the selections were default, and all you needed to do in this case, which in a lot of the cases for the reports, is just to click on the generate button. You don't have to make changes unless you're looking for specific criteria. So we're going to go ahead and close this, go back to report, and we're going to switch to test results. Test results. So under test results, we're going to go ahead and show you a couple of them. So we're going to start with competency performance. So student competency performance. Now, notice that the reports have different options. One of the options here is to select for a particular program year, specific date. When it comes to the dating, this is just a heads up. It's a little tricky because when you are selecting a specific date, you're basically excluding the activity that happens outside of that time frame. So not a good, perhaps, suggestion to do dates. It can be deceiving as far as information that it shows. Notice that part of your information, it says warn if too many pages. So if this report generates too many pages, it gives you a warning. Let me give you a quick story when I was working at the field. So one time my data manager comes and says, I need the payment points monitor report. She did not know the difference between a monitor report and the payment points, alone summary report. So, my assumption was that she needed to, get it printed, and she did want it to get it printed. So I went ahead and clicked on print and walked out of my desk. When I came back, the floor was full of paper because this particular report, the monitor, is hundreds and hundreds of pages. So this is a good feature that the programmers have set to avoid these kinds of situations. It tells you when the report has too many pages that, the report has too many pages and gives you a heads up if you want to still generate in case you want to print. So you won't be, under the same situation I was. So you can go ahead and remove that. In addition to that, you can further filter by these options. Remember how we said the navigator will show you the options that you have for that main page. In this case, since we're talking about a test driven report, you have the class definitions, the class instances, the students that are active in the current program year, or perhaps you want to filter by teachers, or by the test itself. So we can go ahead and do class instances in this case. Notice when I click on class instances, it gives me the classes for this program year, and I can go ahead and select the class. I can further filter using my Add Filters button, for different, parameters. So let's just say ESL. So, and I'm going to go ahead and hopefully I get to select something that has activity here. So I'm just going to hopefully select something that is current. So I'm going to unselect my classes, and I'm going to select these couple of classes, hoping that it has some data. So I'm going to go ahead and generate. Notice that other than that, look at that. The report can display data that meets this criteria. Again, this is simulation data, so there is no sufficient data for these records. Martha, do you happen to know any class that happen to have activity for ESL, say?
Well,
under the rolling hills?
You can look into the organization classes lister and perhaps look through the class start dates from there. Let me check here in my TE. Try the north side. I will try the north side.
So we're going to click on the pull-down menu, and we're going to select north side. All right, very good. So within these ones, let's just go ahead and select a couple of classes here, hoping that any of these will go ahead and give me the data. So let's go ahead and generate once over. Looks promising because it's taking a little longer than, well, look at this right here. This report has too many pages and it gives me a total of 671. So here I have the option of either deselecting some of these classes or going back to my settings and remove that option to warn if too many pages. So I'm just going to go ahead and deselect some and just leave 3. Let's see what it tells me now. Again, the report is taking its time, so that means it's rendering. Otherwise, it would have come up right away with that message that says that there is no data that meets these criteria. and obviously depending on the amount of records that are to be processed within that, safety net it has of safe pages to be generated, is how long it's going to take. So very good. So here you have your report. Notice that it tells me the agency, the site, the class, student is enrolled to, the teacher was not selected. Notice that the form, the report is divided by the form. This particular form is your, ESL 185R. That's for reading. That's on the higher end of your level. That's level C. And, you have the position of the question, whether it's correct or not. And this is for everyone under, actually, no, I take that back. This is for a particular student. And this is why it takes so many pages, because you potentially have 30 students under one class. You're assigning at least one page per student, and you can see how long this will take. But the type of information is very useful for your teachers. So here you have the competency description, and you can see whether the student, the difficult level of the task here, and you can see whether the student has the questions correct or not. If they need enforcement on describing symbols, identifying body parts, and interpreting directions. Same thing as take, interpret, and leave form messages, so perhaps the student need a reinforcement. In addition to that, you can run the same report by the class, which perhaps will be even more useful, and you can address those areas as a teacher that, need to be reinforced. If all students or the majority of students, got question 16 wrong, then perhaps, the instructor needs to do some reinforcement on the instructional, material for this item. All right, so that will be a very useful report. We're going to go ahead and switch. So we did WTUs, we did the competency performance, and we are also going to do under reports. Those of you who are WIOA will do the NRS data integrity. Those of you who are CAEP would do the CAPE. Obviously, in this case, we're using the simulation database, and there is no data for CAPE. But under CAPE, you see the tables, you see barriers of employment, you have your data integrity, which is a very, very useful report. You have your program hours. So just to give you a little bit of information about the data integrity, those of you who do not know, we like to refer to the data integrity as the inventory report. Why inventory? Because the data it shows under the data integrity is an inventory of your data. How many tests you have, how many students you have with less than 12 hours of instruction, how many students you have with more than 4 hours of instructions but no tests. Let me go ahead and run the NRS data integrity, which will give you an idea, a visual idea of what this report looks like. Obviously, these are addressed for NRS. Just keep that in mind. I'm going to go ahead and generate. So all I'm doing over here is I'm selecting, notice I'm selecting the 1920 because this is a complete year. It gives me more of a better, idea, and I'm going to go ahead and click generate. Okay,
Oscar,
very good. So go ahead, I'm sorry.
Maybe you can, after those, you can probably run a few of the CAPE reports for to show out the examples.
Say that again, I'm sorry, Martha.
Maybe you can show at the end, after you explain this DIR, you can probably show a couple of CAPE reports.
So by CAPE, you mean these ones over here?
Yeah, let me try to enable those on the account. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'll work
Thank
that
you,
on my end.
All right, thank you. All right, so as you notice, and again, the reason why we are over here on the NRS rather than the CAPE, to point this out again, is that, as of right now, there is no data enabled for CAPE. So Martha's going to do us the favor of populating that database. Hopefully, we can go ahead and do that. Some of the areas are similar. So just to give you that visual, we're going to go ahead and look at this report in the meantime. There might be a chance that we have to log out and log back in order to refresh this data. So here you have, again, missing birthday outside of 16 to 110. So you notice that there's 0, so that's good. Then you have less than 12 hours of instruction. So we have 131, which equals to 62% of your data. So you can see what, the type of data that the system collects, and this is why we refer to this report as your inventory report. It gives you the percentage to give you that perspective of how much is taken out of your entire population. There are things to expect because we are starting the new year. So say, for example, a student with less than 12 hours, that will be an area that is expected to be higher at the beginning of the program year, because obviously students haven't had any attendance yet. As you enter attendance, as you continue with the program year, then that number should be lower and lower. Same thing for those students who have, pre and post test. If this will be a requirement, pre and post test, at the beginning, your students have that pre-test perhaps, so they would have that. You would have to allow additional time for that post test. But in general, this gives you at least an idea of what the data integrity report looks like. So, and of course, under your own agency, it's just a matter of you going to state reports, California, and your reports over here. So once again, you have the tables, you have barriers to employment, you have your data integrity, and you have your program hours. Those are the 4 reports that are available for CAPE. So we're going to go ahead and continue and wait for Martha's green light to log out and log back in and generate these data. In addition, obviously, I would, ask you to always, if there are any questions, that we didn't cover, again, we just have a fixed, period of time, you can go ahead and send us an email, and the email is techsupport@casas.org. So here you go. It's, over here, techsupport@casas.org. Or you can call us at 1-800-255-1036, option 2. The office is open, the group is available from 6 in the morning to 5 in the afternoon. That is Pacific time. All right, so about 6 in the morning to 5 in the afternoon. That translates to 9 to 8 on Eastern time, Monday to Friday. All right, so just as a heads up. So let's go ahead and switch back over here, and we're going to continue and then go back to this report when we get the green light from Martha. All right, so we're going to go ahead and do federal reports. So again, if this, it shows you the federal data. Again, this is NRS driven. We're going to go ahead and skip that, but essentially under reports, this is where you see your information. Let's go ahead and do some demographic information over here. So, which pertains also to CAPK. So we're going to go ahead and do, let's do demographic detail or summary. Let's do summary. So demographic summary. All right, so I'm going to reports, demographics, and demographic summary. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and generate. So I'm not making any changes on my screen. As you notice, I'm just clicking on the generate button. So I'm going to see what these, so here are all my percentages and numbers based on demographics. If, I need a, information about the age, of my students. So here's the breakdown, the diplomas, highest diplomas achieved by students, gender, and so forth. So you have program over here, you have lowest program in, enrollments here as well. You have highest school of, enrolled, and ethnicity and so forth. Everything that pertains to your demographic is contained over here. Now this is data only, so it's a lot of data, and if you are looking to have a visual of this data, this is one of the reports that will provide you with one. So notice that I click on layout settings. Under layout settings, I can click on the type of chart I would like, whether this is a pie chart, a bar chart, or a combination of the two. So I'm going to go ahead and choose a pie for now, and I'm going to click on on apply. So now the system's going to render all that data it showed me, and now it's going to give me that same data, but it's going to give me also a chart for that. So now I get to see that, excuse me, those students with Social Security, you have the yeses versus the nos, and you have your legend over here, by the way, in the corner. Same thing with age, we can see that the, highest group will be older, I want to say, specify 57, percentage. I will say this other, and I'm going to go ahead and scroll down. Same thing, highest years of school. There is your bar. If this is too hard to read, perhaps you can always switch under layout settings, and switch to any other type of bar. You can have the breakdown under site, under classes, and so forth. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll down and modify my chart, and then do the bars. So here you go. So the bar, same information, it's just in a different, visual format. All right, so that will be your demographic, information, demographic summary report. All right, so let me go ahead and continue over here, and I'm going to go to tools. We're going to go ahead and finish up soon, and then we're going to go ahead and address any questions that have not been answered. All right, so tools being almost the last option here. So tools, as the name suggests, are the different tools that are needed in the software to do different tasks. Those of you who are familiar with scanning will know that, the system does, accept the input of data through a scanner. This is just not a regular scanner. This is not your Xerox scanner. This is a specific scanner that is sold through Scantron. And obviously, if you need more information about the scanning, please go ahead and send us an email, to techsupport@casas.org, and we'll refer you to the list of scanners and vendors. Obviously, Casas does not sell scanners, but we can refer you to the vendor that in the models that are compatible with TE. All right, so again, just to recap, TE does accept data through scanning, and when you are scanning, those are scanning bubble sheets, and they're double-sided. So they come in different combinations, whether it's test and entry, test and update, test and test. There's multiple combinations depending on how the data is used. Usually the most common will be test and entry, because you are to give an entry at the point of pre-testing, and then test and update because you are to give an update at the point of post-testing. That's just, the most common I've heard. All right, so the next one is your third-party import, wizard. So those of you who are importing data, that is, your import wizard, and you can import data from any third-party database, as long as you follow the parameters that are to be given for that import file, so that TE will go ahead and recognize that import that you're doing. Let me quickly refer you to these parameters. I'm going to go ahead and go to the Casas website. So in the Casas website, I'm going to go to training and support. And then under training and support, I'm going to go ahead and click on TOPSpro Enterprise Help on the side menu, and then we're going to click on Data Exchange. Data Exchange basically carries all your, third-party data here. So TOPSpro Enterprise Data Exchange Specifications, this will be the document that you want to download. When you download this specifies the settings that are needed for each of these data. Notice that you have personal and user data, which basically is teachers, class data, which is your class definitions and instances, your definitions and instances. Demographic will be your demographic and records. Students in program status, that will be the enrollment of students into program. Data entry, that will be your entry record. Attendance, your attendance data, your test data. Your student class status will be basically the enrollment of students into classes, and then your update form and any other exams that are needed. So let's just go ahead and switch to turn to page 3, because we're talking about demographics before. So we're going to go to page 3. Oops. can do it by hand. So demographics here. There you go. All right, so demographics. So notice, the format over here. You have row 1, which will equal. By the way, these are to be set in an Excel sheet and then to be exported as a CSV when you are to import them to TE. So the format you are to follow is row 1, which is vendor code, will be the equal of column A under your spreadsheet. Row 2, which is state code, will be the equal of column B under your spreadsheet. And same thing, agency ID will be column C, site ID will be column D, and so forth. In addition, notice the required format. It has to be within the maximum length of characters here, and it also gives you if there is a format that is required, it tells you. And for in the case of gender, for example, that will be on column on row 9. You have M for male, F for female, 3 for unknown, and N for non-binary. All right, so you would have to follow those formats. Same thing with birthday. There is the requirement of 2 dates for the month, 2 dates for the day, and 4 digits for the year altogether. So this is what your programmer has to, either set under your third-party attendance, or you would have to, populate a spreadsheet with that. Now, we do have some templates that are to be used for this. And again, we can provide you all that information just send us an email to techsupport@casas.org, and we can provide you with this information. One quick last thing to mention about this is that in order for you to be able to import data to TE, there is a vendor code that is needed. Notice that is the very first, requirement here, vendor code. The vendor code is provided by the programmers. So what you need to do is use one of our templates, which has already the columns for that specific data, let's say demographic, populate with your data, so just say 3 to 5, students, rows of students, and submit that to techsupport@casas.org. That is given to the programmers. The programmers will look that everything was done correctly, and if it has, then the programmers will assign you with a vendor code, and then you can move forward with importing, populating that, spreadsheet, fully, and then imported it onto TE. This process has to be done per each of these items over here on the top, for personal and user data, for class data, for demographic, for student program, status, and so forth. So each one of them will require for you to submit one of these. Why? Because this is a way of the programmers to assure that you are doing the process correctly, so that you don't encounter any error under the import process. So it's just a way to do a checkup before you are to import. So Martha, do we have any questions there?
There is one question related to the reading level indicator invitation.
Right.
So if you would like to address that one. It's on the
Go
chat
ahead, please.
It says, can you please review how to get to the send RLI invite? Reading level
Very good.
indicator.
Very good point. Thank you. Thank you for that reminder. All right, very good. So as we say, for this to happen, you have to be under the demographic lister. All right, so under the demographic lister, you are to double click on one of those records. Actually, no, I'm sorry, I take that back. You are to click on the more button, and here you have the send RLI invite. So obviously you want to make sure that that record has an email, within the demographic data, and a phone number, whether that is a, it's best obviously if it's a cell number, because that will be sent in a form of a text, so it all depends on the settings that we are to select next. So first step, again, go to records, students demographics. Once you have selected a record, you click on send, RLI invite. And then it's asking you to select one. By the way, you can select multiple at the same time if they all pretend with the same data. So then the system is going to take you to this wizard. We're going to go ahead and click next. we're going to go ahead and click next one more time. That's just acknowledging that we have selected this particular record. Notice that the system will then ask us to select what type of, invite we want to do. Is this going to be an email only? Is this going to be a text only? Is this going to be, first by email or first by text, or we want to send it on both? I will have to say that this might be the most popular, send it both email and text. It's just one click when you basically approach them through both of those means. So we're just going to go ahead and select that, click next, and then it gives us some parameter dates. You can go ahead and leave them as default, and then it gives you the capability of customizing your invite. Those of you who are familiar with the core performance follow-up survey, this is the same approach. So we're going to go ahead and click on Apply Invitation Customization. This is perfect for those agencies that would like to customize and perhaps change the language of the invite. You can add or take, or perhaps you can translate it to any other language. You can go ahead and use these fields to do so. So once you're done, you can go ahead and click next. The system will go ahead and save that, and then once you click on finish, allow some time for the the server to do the connection, and then send that invite. The student would have, will get the invite on their end, will answer the LRI, the placement for a test. I believe is for 40 minutes, and it's not proctored. So there is no need of a proctor. Obviously, the student is doing that from the comfort of their home, using their cell phone or using their computer. Once they're done, they can go ahead and, submit. The student can pause if they choose to, not, suggested, but, if it's needed, the student can pause and the system basically will hold the time, but it is a very useful feature. All right, any questions here?
I just posted on the chat pod a link to our YouTube channel where there is a demonstration on how to send the RLI. Maybe you would like to access that, or maybe the users can grab those links from the chat pod.
Yes. So let's just go ahead and go back over here.
One last question, Oscar. How can administrators grant access to their staff members in case they need to run reports?
Very good question. Very good question. So we're talking about access groups here. All right. So we're going to go ahead and switch to TE, and then we address these the video. We'll address the location of this video. So switching to TE here. Let's see. All right. So for access groups, remember this is a area that is covered under the organization. So we're going to refer to the organization menu, and under the organization menu, we're going to go to we're going to go to access groups. So there's two ways really to address this. If you're looking to adjust the access group or see the level that access group contains, you can go to access group. Otherwise, you go to users, organization and users. So again, under users, we have all the users that have been created under the simulation database. So we're going to go ahead and click on the one I have, and I believe mine was it 01? I think I selected 1. But either way, let's go ahead and double click on the record over here. Once again, notice that the system uses that same format where you have your main page, user information in this case, and I have my navigator here. You want to click on that pencil icon to enable editing, and here you have basically the username, which is recommended to use the work email. Password, notice that the password does not display because, for safety, reasons. If the user needs to, forgets the password, the best and only way will be to change password. So you click on the change password as the data manager, assign a password, and know that this password will be a temporary password. And when the user is to log in, that password will be, the system will ask the user to reset that password to a permanent password. So again, what you're doing over here is just setting a temporary password. The system will do that by default. The system will ask the user to reset that password, and that becomes their permanent password. Now, to address the question, how to give access to the user. So that is done through the next field, which is groups. So you click on the pull-down menu and you select the access group. So notice that under here, this list, we essentially have, two types. One that is with the ET, it starts with the ET, that's for e-test, and the other one that starts with the TE, that's for TOPSpro Enterprise. So again, e-test is for testing, TOPSpro Enterprise is your data managing software. If you can only assign one of each, if the user, for example, happens to be a proctoring coordinator, then you use the combo, which is ET coordinator / proctor. So you don't have to assign one of each. You don't have to assign one of each and one of TE. It all depends on the role of the user. But if the user is to be a proctoring coordinator, and in addition is to be a TE admin, so you can go ahead and do that. You're basically giving them access under the e-test and under TE. So to do that, we're going to go ahead and select that. Notice that in addition to that, I have to click on the button Add. Once you click on the Add button, the system makes me, as the data manager or the person assigning this access, acknowledge for e-test access alone that I have confirmed that this user has completed the training of proctoring coordinator, and I have copies of the certification. It's just basically to enforce that these users must complete a training which helps them to understand the process of testing, remote testing, or just testing in general. So I'm going to go ahead and say yes. And I'm also going to go ahead and add access for TE admin. So I can go ahead and select, TE admin enhance and then click add. Now, obviously, in this case, there is already an access that was assigned, so it's going to give me this error, but I'm going to go ahead and, disregard that. And on the bottom, in order to create an account, you, in addition to that, need the minimum amount of information of first name, last name, and email. You can obviously enter anything else, but you have to, at least if you're looking to just enter the minimum amount, will be first name, last name, and email. All right. Once you do that, you can go ahead and save. If you are curious about the options on the bottom, just to explain, basically these access rights are called individual access rights, and perhaps should not be, attached, because what happens is this: the system will go ahead and determine the rights based on the group that you're selecting. All right, so the only place where you are to check these areas will be under the access group, where you see all the users and you want to see what type of access they're getting. And we're going to go ahead and visit that next. But this right here should be left alone, because the user will be, getting this type of access based on the group that they are selecting. So notice that there's these boxes, which basically means that these access levels are coming from the group rather than the individual. All right. So doing that, we're going to go ahead and cancel for that page, and we're going to take you to the access groups. So access group, this is where you're going to determine what type of level the access that access group is giving to your users. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the TE admin, which is one of the highest. I should say, and after the data manager. So as you all know, there's only one data manager per agency. That's the person that is ultimately responsible for the database. So no one else can match that level of access. The next one down, if the data manager is looking to have that, second person, that, backup person, will be TE admin. So if we are to click under the menu access rights, you see that a lot of these are already selected. Everything that applies, is selected for that user. Then, if we are to click on data access rights, basically you have listing rights, viewing rights, create rights, update rights, delete rights, and check all. So basically listing is basically doing this, going to records, students, demographics, and I am listing. This is the listing part. Viewing, on the other hand, which is the next one down, is me being able to double click on this record and viewing this information. That is the viewing capability. The next one is to create the record. So obviously to create the record will be if I want to, from this lister, click on the new button. That is create, and then, update obviously is to go in a particular record and edit, the birth date, edit the ID and so forth. That will be update. Obviously, delete will be to delete a particular record. So that will be the level of access. So it's right now 11:30, and we addressed the last question, which was access group. Any other questions that need to be addressed?
I think you've covered everything. I just wanted to share with the participants who are still signed in that on your chat box, if you can access the chat pod, there's under the below right hand corner, there is a few buttons in the little icon that you can save the chat if you'd like. So you can keep all these URLs or hyperlinks that we have shared through this presentation. That way you can have them handy and be able to access them at a later point and refer back to the chat if you'd like. You can save the chat on your own computer. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Martha. And in addition to that, please do know that the session has been recorded and it will be available, through a follow-up email that is to be sent. So Veronica will be, taking care of that. And I can only assume that the chat would also be part of that email. So there's going to be a copy saved of the chat. Another thing to mention is our help documentation page. I know I mentioned this, but just to give you that reference, from the homepage, you can always go to training and support. You can go to either eTest Online or TOPSpro Enterprise Help. They both have their own page of help documentation. Very, very helpful. And then you have different, areas to, to get help documents. They all have either videos or PDF documents that would take you through a step-by-step of the, different tasks that are to be done in TE. So let's say, for example, you're looking to how to create classes. So you click on the download and it takes you to organization, classes, definitions. Remember, we did that. We select the size, select the appropriate size, enter your class ID, enter code if applies, enter your description, extended ID if applies, and then you save. Then it takes you to your class instances. Remember, the navigator created a class instances after that, and then it takes you through the steps. In addition to that, also let me refer you to our, one second over here. Let me refer you to our, contact us page, and here you have the tech support email. So you have tech support, and you also have our number. So the email is techsupport@casas.org, and the number is 1-800-255-1036, option 2. We are open or available from 6 in the morning to 5 in the afternoon. That is Pacific Standard Time. All right? Any other questions? Anything else to address? I'll take that as a no. So thank you very much once again for attending to this training. Please check back, for any other trainings that you need to. Again, remember, there is another training that is to be done by Martha tomorrow for generating reports. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a nice day. Bye.
Thank you, Oscar, and thank you.
Thank you, Martha. Thank you, Veronica.
Yes, and thank you to all of you who participated in today's webinar. As Martha mentioned, you can download the chat and save it to your desktop, and we have also included the of exactly where the webinar recording, the chat, as well as the resources that were shared here will be located on the CAP website. So definitely be on the lookout for access to all of those materials. As Oscar and Martha mentioned, she will be facilitating a generating reports webinar for us, and we have also included the URL for that. So please be sure to register for all of those opportunities to access training from CASAS. Thank you all very much for your time and your participation, and everyone have a great rest of the day. See you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Veronica.
You're welcome.